Hi, I'm Dan Danford, and this is another episode of Money Made Easy for dadsdivorce.com. Great question for today. Why do all the safe investments pay so little? My grandfather never invested in anything except bank certificates, and he did really well. Now for me, banks are paying almost nothing, and other safe stuff like savings or government bonds are just as bad. A great observation, and it's a great time because that's absolutely the truth today. I guess one of the things I would say is that, the world changes, and the world of your grandfather or my father was completely different from the world we face today. Now, one of the things that makes a difference is that today, because of the severe recession that we've suffered in the last couple of years, the Federal Reserve has artificially lowered interest rates in our economy. So you and I happen to be talking at a time when interest rates are near their historical lows. Okay? Some government bonds, short-term ones especially, are paying almost nothing. I saw the other day where TIPS, which are a unique kind of inflation-protected bond issued by the government, actually were purchased last week at a negative return. Okay? So that just doesn't happen very often, and part of that is because the Federal Reserve is very deliberately doing that to stimulate borrowing. They're trying to, if savings doesn't work very well, then we ought to be able to go out and borrow and not pay very high interest rates. That's good for the economy, so that's why it's being done. But the broader question is that your grandfather or my father just faced a completely different world of opportunities when it came to investments. There were not mutual funds. There weren't money market funds. Many of the kinds of investments that we think of today didn't even exist back then. Typically when, Grandpa on the farm harvested his crop, and he had $1,000 left over, which may have been his profit for the entire year, he really didn't have any other options but to go to the bank and put it in a bank CD or maybe buy some savings bonds or something like that. So part of the reason why they did that was because there weren't a lot of other things available. Now it's always true, and this is the one absolute rule of economics, that risk and reward are related. Okay, so the only way that you're going to earn more than bank CDs is by stepping out on the risk spectrum someplace. Now, I think people do a pretty good job of evaluating investments. I think they do a terrible job of evaluating risks. They'll look at two things, like the insurance company might come by and offer an annuity or something and say, this is paying 3% today, and compared to the bank, that's a great deal. And we never stop and ask ourselves, why is that? Well, the clear answer is the only reason why they pay a higher rate is because it's riskier in some fashion. In the case of an insurance company, the reason why it's riskier to you as an investor is because you're tying up your money for a much longer period of time. Those annuities and things that are offered by insurance companies typically have surrender charges that may go out 6 or 7 or 8 years to discourage you from cashing out of it before then. Well, on the one hand, you are getting the 3% for that. On the other hand, there's a fair likelihood that sometime in the next 5 years, say, interest rates are going to rise again, and you might want that 3% money to go someplace else. But you aren't going to be able to do that without paying a big surrender fee. Now, that's just one example. Stocks pay higher long-term returns typically, but with a lot more volatility. So stocks might average 9 or 10% a year, but in order to get that 9 or 10% a year, you have to ride kind of a roller coaster, and people don't like doing that. It's just all the way across the board. The bottom line is, nobody, I don't care what business they're in, I don't care, what they're offering you, they don't pay any more than they have to. So when you see two things that look like they're similar, and one's paying 3% and the other's paying 1%, and you can't figure out what it is, then I'm just telling you there's a risk in there that you haven't seen yet. That's just the bottom line. Now, this is a great time to be a borrower, but it's a terrible time to be a saver. I'm not saying it's a bad time necessarily to be an investor, but if you're the kind of person who saves by putting money in the bank, this is really a bad time for that, and it's going to be that way for a while. The Federal Reserve has said that they expect to keep rates down at least for another 2 years. So we're going to be looking at these very low rates for a long time. And you really have two choices here as far as I'm concerned. One is to step out on the risk spectrum a little bit and go to some things that might pay you more money, but accept the risks that go along with that. Or the other is to keep your money in the bank where you're accepting no risk at all, but you're also getting virtually no return. I mean, this is the clearest ever choice you'll make in terms of savings. I mean, in a normal environment, we might talk to somebody and say, hey, look, you can expect to make 8 or 9% a year on stocks if you hold them for 5 years or longer. But if you can't stand the volatility of stocks, you can put it in safe things, bank CDs or bonds or something else, and make 4 or 5% a year. And that seems like a reasonable choice because even with the low returns, I'm not taking much risk. Well, today the trade-off is even clearer. It's no rewards, but also no risk. So if you're one of those people who just can't sleep at nights thinking you might lose money, then the trade-off today is you're going to keep it in the bank and you're not going to make much money on it. And I wish there was another choice, but if there was, all of us that manage money for folks, all of us who advise folks would be rushing to the door to find it because that's what everybody wants. I mean, basically, every single investor out there would love to have high returns with no risk. The bottom line is it isn't out there and it's never going to be out there because that's the basic economic principle. More risk means more reward. I hope this discussion has been helpful as you consider the savings environment today. Keep watching. Hopefully interest rates will crawl back up again and there'll be other opportunities in the future. Thanks. That's another episode of Money Made Easy for Dad's Divorce. We'll see you again next week.